So that's the kind of granular texture we're going to create in this video. My name is Loudon Stearns, and I'm an associate professor at Berklee College and an instructor here at Berklee Online. And this is the kind of technique and kind of exploration that we'll often do in my composing and producing electronic music classes. We'll be using Native Instruments Kontakt in this example, and also the Maschine controller in MIDI mode, and kind of custom mapping it to work perfectly to create granular textures. The first step to this process will be importing your audio file into Kontakt, and the choice of audio file really does make a big difference. You can use whole songs, but I find things that already have a bit of a granular texture are kind of nice. It works well with the sound we're creating. And I created this sound just by taking a variety of songs that I had and really stretching them like crazy within your DAW, that time stretching character you get when you really pull things out, all these kind of digital glitches. It works really well for this. So I created a file like that, and I'm just going to import it into Kontakt. And if I just drag from the browser right into the Kontakt multi-rack, it'll create a new instrument named by the name of that audio file, Robot Noiseathon in this instance, and it'll also map it pretty much across the keyboard. Let's see. I'll go into the wrench here to edit the instrument, and I'll immediately open my mapping editor, and I see that that audio file is mapped pretty much all the way across the keyboard, starting from C-1. Now I have my Maschine controller here in MIDI mode, and you enter MIDI mode by holding Shift and hitting the Control button in the upper left-hand corner. And as I work on this, I also have the Native Instruments control editor open. And I have that because I think it's really important to get, a really kind of solid connection between your controller and the instruments you're creating. If you can get that good connection between them, I think you can really create some pretty amazing instruments. So I have a template I created here called Granular Presentation just for this, and it really is just the basic default template. We're going to edit slightly so it works really well with this instrument. So back in Kontakt, I can already play this, and if I play up and down on my Maschine device here, level might end up being kind of quiet, so you might want to adjust the overall level of your instrument. Bring it up a bit. And here we can play it back at various pitch levels if I go up by octaves using the group buttons. That's pretty much the original audio file at its original tempo, a little bit off. Now we see that as I play up and down the keys here on the Maschine, it's playing faster and slower, and it's also changing pitch, right? So it's like kind of speeding up a turntable. But what I want to do is time stretching, or real-time time stretching, and the technique of time stretching really is the same as granular synthesis, so they're very related, in that when we do stretch something out using a time stretching algorithm, we're going to have to break that audio file up in tiny little pieces we call grains, and then repeat them and do kind of funny things with them so the pitch stays the same. But if we take this to extremes, we can get really interesting granular textures with lots of really fun controls. To enter that kind of mode here in Kontakt, we'll have to go to the source section. And I'll close up the mapping editor for a moment, and we see this source section right here is set to DFD, which stands for direct from disk, which just means that the audio file is loaded into RAM. Just the first little bit of the audio file, is loaded into RAM, and the rest of it is streamed from disk as you hold the key. And it's really good for kind of large pianos and things like that, where you have lots of audio files and you're kind of playing across the keyboard. For this, though, I want that kind of granular time stretching mode. So we're going to move over to Tone Maschine, which is a great kind of granular sound. And we're going to see where we can get a few extra parameters when we're in Tone Maschine mode. First, we have two separate knobs, one for tune and one for speed, because when you're using granular synthesis, you do get the ability to change the tuning of something separate from the speed. We also have these really interesting smooth and formant controls, which we'll take advantage of in this lesson. So let's try this now. I'm going to go down to the lowest octave I have here and play a low note here. And immediately we hear it's not slowed down anymore, right? But I can control the tuning manually, and I can also control the speed. And as we do that, we get these really interesting kind of burbling textures. And we control the tuning of them. And I find you'll find these little sweet spots between speed and tuning where it gets quite interesting. You start hearing the individual grains, you can change their individual tuning, and let's check out that formant parameter as well. That's the business. I like that right there. So right now I'm like playing notes in the machine controller, but then I'm working with the mouse to change those parameters. And I really want to be able to use the knobs on my machine controller to control those parameters, right? So I have real-time control. Now if I look at the screen on the machine controller, I see that by default, this first knob is setting CC 14, and then we have them ascending across, 15, 16, 17, etc. And it's very easy to associate one of those knobs with a parameter in Kontakt. All I have to do is right-click. So let's try with tuning first. I'll control-click or right-click on tuning. I'll choose external sources and learn MIDI CC. And anytime you see the learn word in a DAW or in a synthesizer, it means that the synth or a DAW is going to wait. And it's waiting for a message. And so if I turn a knob, it's waiting to see what CC or control change data is sent, and then it'll automatically associate that with the parameter. So I'll try this out. Hit learn MIDI CC, and then it's waiting right now, and I'll turn CC 14. And immediately that's going to create a modulation lane. We see MIDI CC right here, 14 is controlling pitch. And if I hold a note now, well, it's having a very slight variation. I want it to be dramatic, right? I really want to have a huge change in pitch as I change that knob. The first thing we can do is go to that modulation lane and increase the modulation amount 100%. So now we get an octave. Let's see how that sounds. It's all right, but I want it to be even more. And so this is one of those tricks that I end up using all the time in Kontakt, which is assigning the same exact knob to the same exact parameter multiple times. And this way, it'll double the range of that knob. So I'll just try the same exact steps again. Control-click on the parameter, external sources, learn MIDI CC, turn the knob, turn it all the way up. And you know what? I'm going to keep going. Let's get a couple octaves out of this. Let's try that now. I really dig that, because now I can kind of move from a granular texture up to a really kind of playable instrument. I can even play chords on it. So one thing to note when you're setting up modulation in Kontakt is you move the knob to set kind of the default or bias point, and then it'll modulate up from there when using one of these CCs. So I can set that pretty low, because I like to be able to get down to that really low range where it gives us those kind of individual grains. And then I can go up from there. And I might want to even go one more octave. So let's try that again. Learn MIDI CC and turn that knob and turn it all the way up. And I also like the speed parameter being changed over time. Same exact procedure. Let's do it really quick here. Speed, external sources, learn MIDI CC. I'll just use the next one over on the machine controller. Let's do this again. Same thing. Let's try it out. A lot of great control. And the next one we want is that formant control here. So we'll try that again. External sources, learn MIDI CC, and I'll try the next one over for this. Let's try that. And just like before, I'd like to have it doubled up. Okay, so we have great control over this. You can see I'm starting to get some really interesting character out of this. The one issue I'm going to have here is granular textures, they evolve slowly. They don't move fast. And as I turn those knobs, it kind of changes real quickly. And to me, I'd like it to kind of slowly move from parameter setting to setting. And that's what this lag parameter is for right here. This kind of smooths out the control changes so things happen smoothly and evenly and don't go jerky as you're kind of turning those knobs quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and actually turn up the lag parameter on all of these a little bit. And I'll show you what that's going to do. Not being super precise, you can kind of fine tune this to kind of your taste. But let's try this now. I'll hold this and I'll change pitch. See how it kind of moved up a little slower? And you can exaggerate that if you want. And one of the great things about that with one of these kind of evolving textures, if you set that really high, you can kind of turn it really quick and then move on to something else. And what happens is it seems like you can control more things at once than you really can. It also works really well with these granular kind of textures because things do kind of evolve slowly. So you see I've kind of thrown those really interesting ways. So we're getting nice, interesting kind of granular textures out of this. And now we're going to look at how we might apply some effects and control them in a really interesting way using the Maschine controller. Reverb and delay are great choices to add to granular textures. They kind of repeat on, they kind of overlap more, they make it seem like the grain cloud is thicker than it really is. But I'm finding that if I want to start manipulating effect parameters, I'm going to need an extra hand because I'm already controlling notes and turning knobs of speed and tuning, so I need another hand to do those effects parameter changes. One thing that works great in a granular texture, though, is just holding a note down for a long time. It is kind of moving slowly through that audio file, and it slowly evolves as you hold a note. So a sustain pedal is an excellent addition to this. Now, I could break out a sustain pedal and actually perform it with my foot, but I have all these buttons, so it kind of makes sense to take this maybe note repeat button and turn it into a sustain pedal that toggles on and off. And this will kind of free up a hand so I can manipulate all those parameters. And it gives us a really good ability to maybe use these other groups for other things as well. So I want to change this to send CC64, which is sustain pedal, and I'd like it to toggle on and off for me. To edit that, I'll have to go over to the Native Instruments controller editor, where I have the ability to edit and change what these send while you're in MIDI mode. Now, we can see I already highlighted, because I was clicking on it, is the CC111, and this is really telling me that this button that says note repeat on it is actually sending continuous controller 111. Now I want to change that to 64. So I'll go over to the Assign tab here and just change the number to 64. And we already have it in toggle mode, so that's perfect. That's really all we have to do. Let's go back over to Kontakt, and I'm going to play a note. Maybe play another one. And then hold note repeat. So that's just holding sustain pedal down. And now I'm free to do and I can stop whenever I like. So that's a great method to have, just having that sustain pedal as a button right there. Love it. Now, we want to add some effects to this. There's a couple things that I think will work really well. Two of them would be filters, so a high-pass filter and low-pass filter, and like we mentioned before, delay effects. So let's start with those filters. Now, filters we can add at the group level, and I have options for group insert effects right here, and I'll add a high-pass filter, and I'll choose maybe a ladder high-pass filter here. And then I'll also add a low-pass filter. And I'll use a ladder 4-pole low-pass filter. So with the combination of these two, we kind of get a bandpass filter, and we can kind of manipulate that how we like. I'll turn cutoff down, and then we'll use that same trick to assign a knob to control it. But now I'm going to use these 4 banks. So I'll have high pass, low pass, and maybe some delay effects on the end there. So let's go. This is my high pass filter. I'll turn that all the way down. Right-click on it, Control-click, Learn MIDI CC, and this will be my high-pass filter. And we'll see we can control that. And then we'll go to my low-pass filter. That's all the way, also all the way down. We'll Control-click on that, External Sources, Learn MIDI CC, and we can move this, put that all the way up. Nice to have that control. And then we also have changing the high pass filter now so you can see it here. I'll move it on. Those are great controls to have in this type of instrument. The next thing I might want to add is delay effects. And I like the ability to kind of route to a delay for a moment and then kind of pull that back, kind of a send effect. So this will allow me to kind of send something to the delay and then bring it back. And to do that, we'll have to go down to our instrument send effects and add a delay there. I'm then going to turn the time down a bit and my feedback way up. I really want this to be kind of a long wash of delays. Let's hear this. I let go, we're going to hear that repetition. I'll bring the feedback up even higher. Damping I'll bring up a little bit. I think that's going to work well in a granular texture. Now I don't want to have that in all the time like it is now. So I'm going to go to my send section right here and bring this all the way down. So it's the instrument effects send. So now you won't hear it, right? So now the instrument level is not sending to that delay, but I can send at the group level. So let's go up to the group level and add an effect, send levels there. And now we have a group level send. Now the benefit of that is I can start assigning MIDI controllers to control that, right? So if I right-click on this, I could learn a MIDI CC. But I want to try something a little different here that I think is a lot of fun. Each one of the pads on the Maschine controller can send a CC based on how hard you're pushing on the pad. And I think this is a lot of fun for these granular textures because I could even set up 16 separate effects or effect parameters, and just how I push on the different pads would control those parameters. So let's try to set this up. The first thing I'm going to do is go back over to the Native Instruments controller editor and rearrange what Group H does, right? So right now, Group H is setting high notes. Let's hear. It's actually kind of cool. It's hard to say no to that, but we're going to have to. So I'm going to go over to the controller editor and change what that page is sending. So right now, if I look at page H, and if I change these groups, we're changing the pages there. Right now they're sending notes. And I want to turn that off. So I'm going to click here and shift click on the top, and I'm just going to get all these selected, go back over to type, and actually turn that to off. So that's saying the hit isn't sending anything anymore. So those would not play notes as I play anymore. But I can go over to press, and I can set that to send control changes. So again, we'll select all of our pads, type, and we'll send control changes. And now if we click on the different pads, we can see what CC they're sending. So this one is sending 96, 97, 98, 99. All right? So now let's try this. I'll go back over to Kontakt, and now we can MIDI learn just like we were before. And I'll do this delay first. So I'll bring this all the way down, right-click on it, external sources, learn MIDI CC. Now my group has H, so I know this is now the pressure group, and I'll just push on this right here. Now, that's sending CC, a CC as I push on it, and we see that it's sending CC 96. Now this is where that sustain pedal is going to be so useful, because we're getting a little bit complicated with the Maschine controller. I can now go to B, right, and I can play a note, or a group of notes, sustain them. I can change the quality of it, right? I can filter it, but if I go to H, I can also bring in delay. So if I push hard on that, note repeat, and it didn't work. It didn't work because delay modulation is a little bit different than the other modulations we've been dealing with. Before, I set the parameter at its lowest setting, and then the modulation always modulated up from there. So you notice, remember with the filter cutoff, I set it all the way down, and then I had the knob go in a positive direction up from that. But the send effects work in a little bit of a different way. So if I go to the sends here, if I turn that, let's say, up to 0, we'll see that it does work. Let's try it now. So same procedure again. Play some notes. Sustain. Right? H. That brings in the delays. I let go and those delays stop. So a great way to do with this is turn up the delay, turn off sustain, and then reduce delay when you like, right? So it's a beautiful, it works really well. Now the one thing I would suggest with this pressure is really to use that lag parameter, because these do tend to be a little jittery. It's really hard to control exactly how hard you're pushing on one of these pads. So I find a good amount of lag really helps these. Let's try the same thing again. Sustain that. H. Very cool. Now, I find that you can keep on moving with these techniques in a huge amount of ways. I really like the filters being controlled by pressure as well, and bring in more effects. We said reverbs are great, other kinds of filters, changing the different types of sounds. This really creates evolving, interesting textures, and I really hope you do explore it.